the flies come for the poo, right? There's a push-pull effect with all of your marketing, and it needs to be pushing away the customers that are not a good fit and drawing in the ones that are.
Hey you, I'm Mark, husband of one, father of three, maker of puns, climber of trees, grower of businesses, pitcher of tents, occasional cutter of cheese, word nerd and lover of families. Oh no. Oh no, not yet. No. Oh, here he comes. Where's my oar? Showed that Kraken who's boss. At least until like 2 p.m. this afternoon. I think I'll be due for another attack by then. Let's jump into it.
Hey, welcome to all of you bandits and chilies. This episode is called Friction Fractions. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about recently in my own business. Just looking for ways to reduce friction in all of the processes, everything that we're doing. Looking for anything that is causing delays, holdups, extra admin bloat work, whatever it is, and just trying to get rid of it. And in looking at things through that lens, one of the things that I was going to say discovered, but it's not as profound as that, maybe learnt, I suppose. One of the things I've learnt is that oftentimes it's a trade-off. So that's why I'm going with friction fractions, because you probably can't get rid of the friction just by the virtue of the thing existing and needing to function. There's inherently some friction. If there's steps in the process, then those steps have friction. But sometimes there's a trade-off which does allow you to fractionalize the friction. And the best example that I could think of for this, or at least the first example, and then I've just been turning it around a lot in my mind since I thought of it, is something that happened to me very early on. I think this is very common for people who are, just getting into a business, just starting out, maybe not super confident in what they're doing. But it can also be something that stays with you for much longer than just that period. And it's basically, if just taking that blank slate person who's coming into something, that they're trying something new, they don't really have a lot of confidence about whether they're doing it correctly. They're kind of making it up as they go and learning. That person, because of that lack of confidence, is going to be much more susceptible to the whims of this small subset of potential customers who are just jerks. you know the ones, like the worst customers to deal with. They really, it's amazing how much like the overlap is the same of these people. The people that want the job done yesterday, that are going to complain about every little thing, that don't want to pay you. Like they're just this unreasonable person that comes in right from the point of inquiry. They come in as though they're the center of the universe. I remember I had a lady one time just ask me about booking this job in at a time frame that we couldn't do. And she said, "Oh, can't you move someone?" And I'm like, well, maybe, but I'm not going to. What a ridiculous... And just... I don't... It's not even to say that I would never move one booking to accommodate another. Sometimes I think that's the right thing to do, but... So it's not a blanket rule to say that that's wrong, but just the entitlement, the expectation that came along with the way that she asked. And some people they're just like this. So in that example, if you're new in business, the phone rings, you get this inquiry, and they're obviously a Karen. And maybe you've been stung before, and maybe that it's just going to be better. There's going to be less friction if you just don't do work for this person. But maybe you haven't figured out the way to say that yet. I think this is a good example of the friction, because I think a lot of the fear with, again, that sort of blank canvas person who's just started their business is that they don't want to upset anyone because they don't want to cop negative feedback on Facebook or a negative Google review. So they're kind of at the mercy and the whims of these domestic terrorists that just go around with their unreasonable expectations. And then if you say, you know what, I think it's not a good fit, and I don't think that we should work together, they take it all online because obviously just to prove what you were missing out on by not having to deal with them. But that really underscores the point that there is friction. You can fractionalize that friction. And in that equation that I just laid out there, you would swap having to deal with them, having to spend labor, having to send employees, having to go back and do the job again, having to chase them up for payment, having to just deal with that person. They just take up more than their fair share of bandwidth, right? So if you can cut all of that out and the trade-off is a 1-star Google review or some mean comments on Facebook or whatever it might be. Well, that is a fraction of the friction because you didn't have to do all of this other stuff. It's still friction, it's still annoying, it's still not ideal, but it's a good trade. I'd take that trade. So that's the first part of it. And the other thing which I think is really important is that you have friction on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have lubrication, right? You want your business to run like a well-oiled machine. And to do that, you need to have systems in place. Things need to be set up so that they can run smoothly. Things need to be proactive, not reactive. And in the case of this example, it's about having the strength of your position to deal with that customer when the phone rings. You need to have control of your lead flow. If you're at the whims of random chance as to when the phone rings, it's a lot harder to say no to that customer that you know you probably should say no to. And you might end up doing the work for them because you don't know when the next meal is coming. You don't know when the next call is going to be made by a good customer. So addressing these other areas in the business that relate to that stress point, in that example, lead flow, by figuring that out, then you can approach that same scenario from a position of strength because you don't need that person's business at all. They were never doing you a favor by contacting your business, but at this point, they're certainly not doing you a favor. And you're in a position where there's no scarcity mindset, there's no desperation around just turning them down and saying, no, it's not a good fit. One of our favorite lines is, we don't have space for you on our schedule, which is a really good line because it just applies all the time to the wrong customer because we never have space for you on our schedule. We also have a special, like in our phone routing, we have a special voicemail set up just for banned customers. Their number goes on a list. And when their number calls through, they get routed through to a voicemail, which essentially just says that we're busy. You know, the lines are all busy or whatever. But that's all it will ever say. And we just don't deal with those people again. If we do get bitten and it turns out that our spidey senses didn't pick it up the first time, we pop them on there so that we don't have to deal with it again. That's one side of it in terms of that specific example of lead flow. Another aspect to that would also be your marketing and branding in general. So in order for someone to make an inquiry with your business, they have to somehow hear about you. They feel prompted to reach out to you. So there's a service that they're interested in, there's an offer that you're running, whatever it is. And then they call you or they email or submit a website inquiry form, whatever it is, they establish contact. And typically, before you're actually doing the job with that person, you're going to converse about what the needs are. You're going to figure out what the scope of work is. You're going to tell them a bit about your business. You're going to work out what the pricing is, and it's going to be booked in and you're going to do the job, right? So in that, if you have these, unfavorable customers that are not a good fit getting through the process, then there's something in that process that's wrong. And maybe you can't fully fix it 100% where you always eliminate every single one of these people. But if you're getting a lot of them, certainly there's room for improvement. And it's worth examining it because the flies come for the poo, right? There's a push-pull effect with all of your marketing, and it needs to be pushing away the customers that are not a good fit and drawing in the ones that are. So you want to be speaking to your ideal customer avatar. If everything is geared towards that, what you'll find is that those really nasty individual people that have a very specific... This is another element of... I'm just kind of rambling here, but this is another element of the entitlement that I've noticed with this kind of customer. This is like our anti-avatar. They tend to be so sure about the way that things should be. It's as though they come into the point of inquiry with the business, imagining that they were running the business and how they think it should be. And they'll often use the line of, as a business owner myself, I don't know how many of these people are business owners or not. Like some of the things that they say, some of the unreasonable expectations that they have, I kind of doubt that claim a lot of the time, but maybe they are. But realistically, if just as a quick example of that, you'll get a customer who makes that statement in relation to something having gone wrong, maybe with their service, and you've done the best that you can in reasonably fixing that up, and they're still not happy, and they're complaining about it. Well, as a business owner myself, and it's just like, do things never go wrong in your business? Like, is that a thing? Teach me what you know, but. No, I don't think that's really the case at all. I think that they just like to complain. But when they come in with this sort of entitled attitude of having a very set idea about exactly how you should run your business. They'll complain about all the kinds of things that your ideal customer actually loves about your business. So when the more that you present yourself to your ideal customer, the more that you'll repel these people, because they'll just be like, oh, it's so unprofessional that your website says this, or the way that you answered the phone, this was annoying. I didn't want to have to, do this or that in the process. Why can't it be like this? Why can't you just give me a price over the phone? I don't want a paper copy of the quote. It's too much. Just tell me a price, whatever it is. And I'm not necessarily saying that you need to do all of those things that I sort of by tacit default put in the good column, but these are the kinds of things. They'll just have a problem with the way that things are. They can't just accept the way that things are. They want you to have already pre-planned your entire business to accommodate them, because obviously you should have known exactly what they wanted and that was the only correct way to run your business. I mean, duh. So anyway, point being, another way to sort of lubricate this well-oiled machine is to be really targeted in all of the messaging, right from just your general presentation and branding, the way that your social media presence, your Google business listing, your website, your vehicles, the way that your staff communicate, especially your admin communication, how the phone is answered, what the process looks like, all of that. If you build that for your ideal customer, automatically it's going to repel the people that you don't want to work with. That then also puts you in a real position of strength. The last area I wanted to touch on with this is something that's been a real focus of mine specifically in regards to eliminating friction. And that's basically just in thinking about the customer journey in the business and what steps need to happen really throughout the whole customer experience, but most especially between that point of inquiry and them having their job booked. So just trying to really streamline and reduce friction around the inquiry and the quoting process. And something that I've found with regards to this is that one of the weaknesses of our business is that we do too many things. I'm not saying we can't change it. We are sort of committed in the things that we're doing. Of course, we could pivot and change it, but if you are doing less things, if you have one single service that you're doing, aim to keep it that way for as long as you can. The temptation, which I've suffered from this, obviously this is how we got into this position, is shiny object syndrome. And other services always look really cool, right? They, maybe it's the results, the visual results, maybe it's the equipment, maybe it's a bit of a status thing, maybe it's just something new and different. And there's always ways that we can justify it. And some of the justifications are very valid. If you have multiple services that complement each other, you're in a position to book multiple services at individual jobs, increasing the average ticket, increasing efficiency because you're doing all the work in one place, not needing to travel. Every lead then becomes instantly potentially more valuable because you have more to offer them. So there's a lot of upside to that, but it does create a lot of friction. It's a trade-off. In my opinion, the trade-off in general is not worth it. I'm not saying not ever. I'm not saying it has to be one service only, but by default, as a blank canvas question of should I add another service, my default answer is no. And I have to keep telling myself that. But the reason for that is that it adds friction in the way that you can scale. It adds friction in every step of the way on the way to scaling, not all of which are even scaling. They're things that you would have to do in order to scale, but they're also the same things that you have to do in order to stay right where you are. And now there's just additional friction. So that includes hiring and training. Now there's an additional service or an additional 3 services that employee needs to be competent in order to be sent off to jobs on their own. So that whole process now takes a lot longer. There's additional equipment, there's additional inventory, there's additional maintenance. There's so many bits and pieces that go along with that. I think one of the things that puts people on this track is fundamentally a scarcity mindset. And again, I've been guilty of this, but it's a scarcity mindset to think that there's not enough work in the thing that I'm currently doing. So I need to add more services so that I can get enough work. And very rarely is that going to actually be true. So instead of looking at adding additional services, again, by default, all other things being equal, very generic answer to that question. But instead of that, I think that the best thing to do by default would be to work out how to generate leads. If you can solve the lead generation problem for the service that you do, and then you can figure out how to scale one service, that is going to be exceptionally streamlined because you don't have all of those other things to worry about. You can just focus in that one lane, and as Tommy Mello says, then you can nail it before you scale it. And it's much easier to do that focusing on one service as opposed to 7 services. Today's quote comes from James Cash Penney, and he said that the keystone of successful business is cooperation. Friction retards progress. I was looking for a quote specifically about friction in business, and in coming across that one, it kind of made me think of a separate element to this, which is that idea of cooperation. Obviously, the first thing that springs to mind is between people, and that's super important. But I think also in processes, it's the people that run the systems, that implement the processes, but the processes themselves need to be in cooperation. They need to be in support of each other. So just as an example, maybe there's a maintenance process and the actual use of the equipment on the job process. And the maintenance needs to be in support of that. But that's not always as easy as it seems, because it requires downtime for that equipment to be proactively maintained. And if that support is not given, then the equipment is more likely to break. And so that balance and that cooperation is going to eliminate friction, but that's not the default state of affairs. That needs to be worked for.
Dad joke alert.
Maybe you can't fully eliminate friction. I know I've tried. I tried to give up friction cold turkey, but I just couldn't stop. That's it. Have an awesome day. Make someone else's day awesome. That someone could be me if you left a 5-star review for this podcast. Just saying. Have a good one. Catch ya. Bye.
Are you picking up what I'm laying down? Are you sniffing what I'm stepping in? If you're looking for a really valuable community centered around building your business, being really intentional with your spouse and kids, and if you think you can tolerate my terrible dad jokes, then join Family-Oriented Business Growers. It's awesome. There's self-paced challenges designed to help you solve key pain points within your business in short, intentional sprints. There's awesome people in there doing awesome things who have experience with stuff that can help you, having stood where you stand. You'll benefit from what's in there, we'll benefit from having you in there, you legend you, and best of all, it's totally free and also free of toxic shenanigans because we don't tolerate none of that. The mission of the group is to help 250 family-oriented home service business owners reclaim 5 hours per week for what matters most whilst growing their business this year. So jump in there and get amongst it. Join via warplan.au, that's warplan.au. Oh no. He's early. Warplan.au. Catch you in there. Ah!